Brant DXT grain carts have efficient unload speeds, large carrying capacities, unmatched durability, and reliable components that make sure your cart is working when you are. Lead the field with DXT grain carts from Brant. Visit your local Brant dealer for more information.
Uh, a really neat exchange on X this week, last week, talking about fertilizer, not the prills, still being in the soil long time after applying fertilizer. And what do you call it? A Dalmatian field? What's this all about?
Yeah, that's a ton of fun. So I've been fortunate enough to get out to Idaho and Washington State and speak a few times, and so there's some growers out there that I interact with pretty frequently, and Dan Lakey is one of them, and that's his field, and he's just he's has not had any moisture since seeding, and maybe that's changed in the last week. I hope so, but it's been so dry that he mid-row bans his nitrogen, or at least a decent portion of his nitrogen, and the the nitrogen prills in the mid-row band are still in the prill form.
Mm.
And by the way, fertilizer takes the moisture first. And so if the seed was in that band, you would have no stand whatsoever, because if the fertilizer can't get enough moisture to dissolve, there's never enough moisture for the seed. He clearly got his seed a bit deeper in that situation because he does have a stand. But yes, where the plants, or where there's a little more moisture and some of those prills have dissolved, he's got darker green. But man, where it hasn't been able to access any of that nitrogen because the nitrogen is in dry storage, it's in dry dirt. Yeah, she's just as yellow as a duck's foot. And then the discussion becomes, is liquid better? I expect, I don't know this for sure, but I expect anybody that actually did anhydrous in that part of the world this year and went deep, because you have to go deep with anhydrous, put that nitrogen down 6, 8 inches, that's going to be a win, because there's probably moisture at 6 to 8 inches, and the wheat roots will get down there and access some of that moisture, but takes more power. There's lots of issues around doing that as well. So a fun discussion, but not the best, or not the place that you want anybody to be, where it's that dry that the fertilizer doesn't even dissolve.
Mm-hmm. Dalmatian fields. I like that
Yeah.
one. It's very
Yep.
visual. Yeah, exactly. Okay, sticking with the nutrient discussion, lots of questions around potash on soybeans. What are we seeing out there?
So where it's dry, we're already starting to see some potash deficiency in soybeans. And where it's wet, we're not. And you go, well, okay, what's going on there? Because some of these fields actually have very solid potash fertility levels. But when it gets dry, then the potash, the clay dries out, and it basically traps the potash in the soil, and the roots can't access it. And it's one of those situations where a bit of starter fertilizer, potash starter, in a band, even though you've got lots in the soil, it's one of those cases where that can play. And it plays because the fertilizer potash doesn't come in contact with all those clay particles the way that your soil test potash does. And so you get this little area where there's still potash available, and you can save that plant. Now, lots of questions. William from Quebec actually asking some great questions. He's got a sandy field. Last time he grew soybeans there, it went potash deficient in early August, and he's kind of saying, I'm thinking about putting a foliar on to try to prevent that. I did broadcast 100 pounds of potash before I seeded the soybean crop. And my answer is, it's almost impossible to fix a potash deficiency by a foliar application, because number one, you can't get enough potash on to correct it, because it's a macronutrient, not a micronutrient. And number two, until Clark Fretz's son Caleb gets this nanotechnology figured out, we can't get the potash through the leaf. And so my answer to William was, if you're worried about that, uh, I would actually go out now and spread another 100 pounds of potash because we'll get some rain and it'll be in the soil, and the soybean plant can utilize that before or when it goes into that high demand for potash. And soybeans have a really high demand for potash in the seed fill stage. So lots of fun around, this whole discussion with potash. And I'm surprised that I see potash deficiency already. It's very limited, but it's there, and we're trying to fix it with broadcast dry potash. That's I think the best option at this point in time.
All I know when I first learned about soybeans is that P and K, and especially K, when you fertilize for soybeans the years you're not growing them. That's what I was told. And that sort of holds here, is that you really do have to plan ahead because of when the beans need it. Is that why it's so important? Is that they need it so late in the season?
Well, with potash, I would say yes,
Okay.
absolutely. And by the way, you say especially potash, believe it or not, we've learned with soybeans because we always used to say, when I went to school way back in the
Oh,
days of the
Peter.
dinosaurs,
Uh-huh. Yeah. When horse and buggy all the way there. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
that was the thought process that potash was everything on soys. We have learned that with both soys and corn, uh, you know, phosphorus and potash both matter. We used to think
Hmm.
corn was phosphorus, soybeans were potash, and never the twain shall meet. That is not true. With corn, potash is as important as phosphorus, and with soybeans, phosphorus is as important as potash. But if you are in that later period, you're into August, you're into grain fill, and that tends to be where we see the worst potash deficiency most of the time, unless the soil goes really dry, as we are seeing some here in Ontario. Like trying to feed it the amount of potash you need, it just gets to be impossible. And even if
Yeah.
I spread dry broadcast on the surface, well, we need rainfall to get that to dissolve, just like Dan in Idaho needs rainfall to get his nitrogen to dissolve. If you don't get the rainfall, it just doesn't work. And foliar, we just can't seem to get enough into the plant. So
Hmm.
having sufficient fertility in the soil for that soybean crop is a really important part of high yield soys.
Hmm. Okay. Or just don't grow soybeans. Okay. No, I don't love them.
Grow
You know,
oats for woolly pigs
yeah,
instead.
there you go. No, I don't feed it. You know what? Okay, this is a sidebar. We bought a creep feed for my bottle lambs, and they sorted out the oats in it and left them.
Wow.
Right? Are they the pickiest lambs ever? Maybe. Anyway, they really like corn, so they're Ontario lambs. So there you go. Last point. Tonight, the agronomist goes at 8 p.m. Eastern. Check it out. Go to YouTube, 8 p.m. Eastern. It'll also, of course, broadcast on X, Facebook, or realagriculture.com/agronomist. Go there because Peter, you are the host tonight, and you get to talk about targeted spraying. Are you
Yeah,
excited?
I am really excited. This is going to be a great panel, a great discussion. See and spray, green on green, green on brown, and in fact, the people from University of Wisconsin that we have on tonight, they have some videos up where it's astounding. They are they have a unit that has I don't know how many nozzles per foot, and in the video, they have a corn plant and a grass weed that is maybe an inch away from the corn plant, and they have water sensitive paper on the corn plant, on the weed, and that unit is so targeted that it sprayed the weed. You can see the water sensitive paper with the droplets, and there's no droplets at all on the corn plant. And I'm just going like, blow my
Whoa.
minds.
Yes. Now, and I had a farmer last week who had shared with me some results of trialing some of this technology in a cornfield, and he estimated probably a 60% herbicide saving. Now, I'm not saying that's what you can expect all the time, but the point was sort of, it's about time some of this technology starts saving us some significant product and likely money. I know technology costs money, so it's not always a one-to-one. But and Tom Wolf's on tonight, and he is a really key advocate for the less we have to spray, the better, right? The less product that goes out the door, the better. So if we can save 10%, 20%, 60%, look out. So I'm excited. I am going to have to watch the replay, which everybody, it lives on YouTube. You can watch the replay. But I am super excited. And thank you for doing this. I'll be in Lethbridge and unavailable. So I'm excited for you. Please don't wreck my show. Thanks.
Oh, I'll never be able to replace you, Lindsay, as moderator, but I will do my very best and I will have fun.